Med school application timelines are really useful tools as you are starting to get your preparations in order for the application cycle. So today, that's what I want to go through with you, some med school application timelines pertinent to a few different types of application service. First, hi, my name is Dr. Sarah Klebe, and I'm an admissions expert at BeMo. So just a note before we begin, in terms of these application deadlines, today I'm going to be talking about the three primary application services, which is AMCAS, which is the sort of general med school application in the US, TMDSAS, which is the application service specific to Texas, and AACOMAS, which is specific to osteopathic medicine. Not all medical schools participate in these application services, so you really need to ensure that you're aware of any independent deadlines for such programs, because again, these are used in a lot of different programs, but not all medical schools use these services. So you need to find out quite early in the process whether your school or the schools to which you want to apply do participate in any of these services so that you know how to apply. And also note, for the programs that I'm going to talk about here today, the specific dates can vary a little bit from year to year, so you'll need to verify the exact dates for each application cycle. But I want to give you a rundown of the sort of general times that you can expect particular landmark moments to take place each application season. So, for example, some of the things that I'll say is simply late August, early September, and what that means is that, you know, one cycle the deadline was August 30th, the next cycle it was September 1st, the next cycle it was September 2nd. So there's just that sort of buffer room around the sort of beginning and end of certain months. So that's often what I'm referring to, but again, make sure that you verify the exact dates for every cycle. One other sort of preface before I get into the timelines. Prior to application season, there are a number of things that you need to either have in order or at least sort of have in the works so that things run smoothly once you do run into application season. Regardless of which application type you'll be using, planning in advance for application season will really help everything go much more smoothly for you. You'll have plenty of time to arrange for things like standardized tests, securing letter writers, consulting experts for feedback on your application, and things like that. And so here are just some general recommendations that we have in the months leading up to application season, as each major application system usually opens around the beginning of May. These are the things that you'll want to be thinking about, ideally at least in the late fall of your sort of application year or your academic year. You can start them in the winter, but you'll really save yourself a lot of trouble if you get started earlier, particularly in the sort of mid to late fall. It's not an ideal world, that might not be possible, but if it is possible to start doing those preparations at that time, please do. So here's what we recommend. First, you need to have a short list of the schools to which you want to apply. So that means looking through the factors for choosing the right med school for you. You're not necessarily going to want to cast a very wide net. You really need to do some research into the schools, into their programs, into their admissions criteria, and how well you stack up against previously accepted applicants. So that's something that takes some time, but knowing what schools you want to apply to and what sorts of things you need to emphasize in your applications makes things much easier come early May. You are also going to want to start familiarizing yourself with MCAT dates and the MCAT release dates. This means getting started on your MCAT prep ideally, but the biggest thing is to note that, you know, if you're ready, most application services recommend taking the MCAT by no later than the 3rd week of May. That will ensure that you have an MCAT test release date, generally in June, so that the schools are able to receive your scores as soon as they begin reviewing applications. This will avoid any delays in your applications. So that's something that you should look into. Ideally, before you get started on your applications, you should at least be brainstorming some ideas for your personal statement if your application requires one, and start seeking out some expert feedback on that. Most medical programs are going to require some form of personal statement type essay. Reviewing some successful medical school personal statement examples is really useful. We have some of those on our website. I'll make sure to put a link in the comments for you. And also having that time to reflect with an expert so that you can start brainstorming, writing drafts, getting feedback, and engaging in that sort of back and forth that is the edit and review process, so that your voice is as strong as possible in that personal statement. And one last little thing, and I say this as a person who's taught in higher education for a long time, go ahead and start deciding on and reaching out to possible letter of recommendation writers. These are usually going to be your professors. So setting up a meeting with that professor or those professors to discuss the content of the letter, what you want to do, where you want to go, the details of the work that you've done in their courses or with them in research, and really just spending some time offering some ideas about the kinds of qualities that you hope they can speak to in the letter that they write for you, assuming they agree to. Doing all of this in the fall is going to make your professor's life a lot easier. They'll probably be able to just put it together over winter break, and it won't come in between, you know, that sort of bananas exam time at the end of the term and then the chaos that is beginning of term. It's chaotic for students. It's just as chaotic for their professors, trust me. And letters of recommendation take time, more time than you think, especially if it's going to be a good letter of recommendation. Sort of middle of the road letters of recommendation are really easy to write, but a good letter of recommendation takes time. It takes multiple drafts. It takes sincere reflection on what you think of the student at the academic level, the personal level, as a candidate for the program they're applying to, all of these things. And so if you approach your professor with, you know, like a week or two advance notice before the letter of recommendation is due, they'll do their best for you. They will likely write you a good letter because this is what we do. But if you give them that time, you will make them very happy. And a happy letter writer is a good letter writer. So that's just a little tip from me. All right, now into the substance of the thing, these application timelines. So we'll start with AMCAS. Again, AMCAS is the most common, the most widely used application system for the MD degree in the US. So generally, as I said, around early May is when AMCAS applications open, where you're able to access the application materials, start working on and completing your personal statement, your work and activities section, your most meaningful activities, and all of that. So you're going to want to get started on that as soon as applications open. This is why we recommend having done some of this work, or at least the brainstorming around it in advance. It'll make your life easier. Then around late May to early June, AMCAS will begin accepting application submissions. So you want to submit your application as soon as possible. Ideally, you want to get it in the day that they begin accepting applications. There's information in your application that needs to be verified, and the longer you wait, the longer it takes for your application to get to the schools. I'll get to why that's really important in just a second. So technically, in terms of the due dates or deadlines for AMCAS, you can technically wait to submit your application up until the end of, sorry, I have the hiccups, up until the end of July. But this is going to significantly harm your chances of getting in. Ideally, apply by July 1st at the absolute latest, but even this is far from ideal, and this is why. In the US, a lot of processes utilize what are called rolling admissions. And what that means is that those who apply earliest will receive first consideration. Right? So everyone who submits their application on the day that it is able to be submitted, they are going to get first consideration as long as everything is verified and checks out, simply because they were first. And if there are spots remaining after they've been vetted and reviewed as candidates, that sort of first round of applications, then additional invitations for interviews and things like that will be sent out. But you can see that this is, I mean, it clearly puts you at a disadvantage. The later you apply, the less likely your chances. So really try to aim for that initial submission date, again, late May to early June. In late June, the initial sort of round of verifications has gone through. AMCAS releases its first batch of applications to the medical schools. So again, to ensure that your application is in this initial batch that's sent out in late June, you need to have that application submitted and in as soon as possible. And again, you need to make sure that you have completed the MCAT by the 3rd week of May. Again, that's why a lot of experts really suggest that if you are ready to take the MCAT by that point, 3rd week of May, take it then, because then your scores will be released just in time for AMCAS to release the applications to the medical schools. Then generally, so we're going to start talking in some wider frames of time here. Anywhere from May to February, you may get a request for a CASPER test if the program or one of the programs that you're applying to utilizes it. So we do have a list of schools that use CASPER. I'll make sure to put that in the comments as well. I'm just going to highlight it in my text here so that I don't forget. If any of your schools require CASPER, you want to start CASPER prep, again, quite early if possible. As soon as you know that you'll have to take a CASPER test, you should start preparing for the CASPER test so that you'll be ready to go, again, to get it done as soon as it's needed. August to September, this is the period when schools will send out secondary applications if they utilize secondary applications. These are frequently essays, prompts that they want you to respond to or reflect on. Some schools will send out secondary applications to everyone who applies. Other schools only send out secondaries to people who've sort of made it through a first round of vetting. You need to check the instructions specific with each secondary application. They'll have their own deadlines and instructions for those. So make sure that you know when each set of secondaries needs to be returned. Again, those come out August to October. Anywhere from September to February, that's interview season. Medical school interviews, panel interviews, traditional interviews, hybrid interviews, multiple mini interviews, all of those things. Most of that stuff happens from September to February in the US system. That's not to say that there aren't any sort of outside of those boundaries, but generally this is the big season for interviews. And so then, you know, once you've gotten to the interview, you put forward your interview prep, and then you find out whether you got in or not. So that is that sort of AMCAS timeline in a nutshell. If you want more details on that, one last thing I'll make sure is in the comments is a link to our blog with these med school timelines that have a lot more detail to them, and that also have so many helpful links for you, access to some of our resources and information that's going to be really helpful for you as you plan ahead. All right, so folks in Texas, or hopefully going to Texas, thank you for being patient. We'll talk about the TMDSAS now. So TMDSAS, again, is specific to Texas. Not only is it used for a number of medical schools, but also a number of dental schools and veterinary schools, but we'll be focusing on medicine here. So this is an application for, again, many schools. Not all of the schools in Texas use this, but many of them do, for MD programs, also DO programs, so osteopathic medicine programs, and some schools that offer dual degrees, so MD PhD or DO PhD. So again, similar time frame in terms of when this opens. Early May is when TMDSAS opens. So you'll have to complete your employment and activities, a personal statement, a personal characteristics essay, as well as sometimes an optional essay. And if you're applying to one of those dual degree programs, there's a specific essay requirement for that as well. So again, as with AMCAS, we really recommend looking into these requirements and at least getting started on the brainstorming process in fall of the year of the sort of application cycle to which you want to apply. That's a significant number of essays to have to write in a very short period of time if you haven't prepared early. May to July in Texas is Casper season. So again, some schools use Casper, some don't, but if any of yours do and require it, you'll likely have to take it between May and July if you are applying in Texas. So make sure that you've started your Casper prep as soon as you know that you have to take the Casper test. Mid-May is the submission for deadlines applying through just one specific program, the Joint Admission Medical Program, JAMP. So JAMP is a special program that is designed to help highly qualified but economically disadvantaged students in Texas pursue an education in medicine. So if this is a program that would be useful to you or that you already know about and you know that you'll be utilizing, note that your deadline for your application is a bit earlier than some of the other applicants. Mid-May is usually the due date for that. Then late May to early June, again, JAMP students, this is when your applications need to be supplemented with letters of recommendation. So make sure that you've made that connection with professors or other letter writers who can write for you, and ensure that you give them enough time in advance that they can write you a solid letter to get in by late May to early June. From July to mid-January, all the way around, that's interview season in Texas. Again, the standard med school interviews, traditional panel, multiple mini interviews, hybrid, all of these sorts of things come anywhere from July to mid-January. It's worth noting, though, that beginning MMIs and interviews in July is really early. And so because these interviews can begin so early, we really recommend you begin your MMI prep or your med school interview prep as early as possible. That can be a really short amount of time for preparation if you haven't already been building up your skills. Around early August, that's the deadline for your supporting documentation, so transcripts, letters of evaluation, Mcat scores, and things like that if you're applying to an early decision program in Texas. And that is also the deadline for submitting the application to some programs. So a few schools, Texas A&M, the Partnership for Primary Care Program, the Pre-Med Fellows Early Admissions Program, and the Engineering to Medicine Early Admissions Program all have deadlines in early August, as do a few other early decision programs. So again, if you're using one of those programs, you need to look into those specific dates. And then generally, late September to early October is where you'll find the med school application general deadline. So not the early decision programs or the select programs noted earlier, but late September to early October is when all of the other applications are due, which are just sort of the more widespread applications. Note that this also is the deadline for paying your fees. Any fees received after that very specific deadline are refunded and your application won't be considered. So they don't offer any extensions or anything like that. So this will be a date late September to early October that you need to keep an eye out for. Around mid-October is the deadline for all supporting documents, again, transcripts, letters of evaluation, and things like that if you're not applying to one of those early decision type programs or JAMP. If it's sent by mail, note that the documents have to be postmarked by that date. And some schools won't extend offers for interviews until all of your supporting documents have been received. So you really want to be meticulous with this and ensure that everything's going to get there on time. And again, the date here is a little bit different for TMDSAS than AMCAS. Make sure that your Mcat test and release dates align so that everything will get there by mid-October at the latest. And this is also around the time, mid-October, that some med schools begin offering admission offers for non-residents or some special program applicants. Mid-November to late December is the pre-match open acceptance program for admission offers to Texas resident med school applicants. So Texas has a unique sort of matching system, and this would be sort of the period of acceptance prior to that match season, that match time. Mid-January is your deadline for ranking your school preference for your admissions match through TMDSAS. And then finally, late January to early February is when the results start being announced and those rolling admissions begin. And then finally, and quite a bit shorter, is the AACOMAS or DO applicants who apply through the AACOMAS application system. So a brief note here, osteopathic medical schools are not as systematized as the schools that participate, particularly in AMCAS. In general, the application cycle again opens in May each year and closes the following April, but the actual deadlines vary considerably by school here. So I can give you some general deadline guidelines, but it's really critically important that you verify the exact dates for each cycle, as well as each school's additional requirements. Note that many DO programs do utilize the CASPER test as well as multiple mini interviews, the MMIs, and other medical school interview formats. So you'll need to be preparing for these. So again, early May is when the AACOMAS application opens. You need to do a personal statement for that, so you want to be prepared in advance to get that written and polished. Around mid-June is when the first AACOMAS applications are released to the medical schools, and that's about the time that most schools will start reviewing those applications as well. Early August is when you are encouraged to ensure all of your application materials are complete and submitted by this time. Again, the actual deadlines are going to vary considerably from school to school, but ensuring that everything's arrived by around early August is going to set you off on really good footing. And then early December to early April is when all of the different AACOMAS application and individual schools have their deadlines. Note that also that a lot of schools have secondary applications, and all of those are going to have their own deadlines as well. So on our blog that goes with this video, which again I'll make sure is linked in the comments for you, there's a lot more detailed information on all of this. I didn't want to sit here and, okay, on February 14th it's XYZ school, on February 15th it's this, and this school. That would get very boring very quickly. And a timeline video is, not necessarily the most dazzling thing as it is. So do be sure to check out that blog post so that you can see the most comprehensive information that we have in the absence of those specific deadlines, because they're not consistent every single year. So I hope, I've been talking for a long time. I hope that you have enjoyed this video and that it was helpful. If so, please do go ahead and like it, share it with a friend who might benefit from it. Be sure to subscribe to our channel on YouTube. I promise many of our videos are much more exciting than this one. Follow us on Facebook, look for us on a variety of other social media platforms, and feel free to comment below with any questions you might have. If you'd like us to help you, click the link that should appear either above or below this video, which will take you to BeMoMedApplication.com, where you can see our application review sessions and schedule our programs and schedule a free initial consultation. We'll set you up with one of our admissions experts to answer any questions you might have and get you started on your preparations. We have programs to suit any of your needs, and we're always happy to work with you to determine which plan is going to support you and your goals most effectively. As ever, thank you so very much for your time. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.